I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist and expert in autoimmune disease. And today we're diving into a topic that's very close to my heart and also deeply relevant to many of you listening, and that is the anxiety autoimmunity loop. And we'll unpack why autoimmune conditions and anxiety are so often intertwined, what's happening in your body when your nervous system is stuck in that overdrive state, and most importantly, how calming the nervous system can actually accelerate healing. So whether you're dealing with Hashimoto's, psoriasis, alopecia, or any other autoimmune condition, or you just know stress is sabotaging your recovery, today's episode will give you the science, strategy, and hope that you need that you can overcome it. And I used to live in a state of anxiety, and I still get anxious now, but I wouldn't say I have anxiety anymore. I felt a real shift in my body in my 30s when I was going through my own recovery, and I'm sure it's through working on my health and working on some biochemical imbalances that were there at the time, but also just this shift in my nervous system. I feel that sets me up for a much more stable foundation so that when my diet isn't as optimal or I go through a stressful event or something happens, I'm in a much more stable state to deal with that. And that is why it's so important to not just focus on the autoimmune disease, but also the anxiety. And unfortunately, there is this vicious cycle to it, which we will discuss today. So let's talk with the loop itself. And autoimmunity at its core is an inflammatory condition. Your immune system is sending out chemical messengers, things like cytokines, interleukins and tumor necrosis factor. And you may have heard of this if you have an autoimmune condition, because a lot of the medications are targeting these chemical messengers. And these are designed to signal danger and coordinate the immune response. And they can just exacerbate any inflammation that is already present as well. Now, here's where it gets interesting. These inflammatory messengers don't just stay in your joints, your thyroid, or your skin. They actually cross the blood-brain barrier. And once inside the brain, they interact with the very systems that regulate mood and thought. So think about serotonin, for example, and that's often called your feel-good neurotransmitter. Inflammation diverts tryptophan, which is its precursor, and you can take tryptophan, and if you are deficient in tryptophan, it can actually mean that you are not producing enough serotonin. But what can happen is that rather than tryptophan creating serotonin, it goes down a different biological pathway, and it goes down a pathway which is more pro-inflammatory. And it is one of the markers that is tested in what I call my cell health test, the metabolomics test, to understand whether somebody is in this state where their body feels that rather than making serotonin from tryptophan, it sends it down another pathway and it makes something called quinolinic acid instead, and that is linked to neuroinflammation. Quinolinic acid is a neurotoxic metabolite, and that not only means that you have less serotonin, so less of the happy hormone, but you can feel low in and of itself just by having lower serotonin, but because of this neurotoxic metabolite that you produce, you may feel irritable or on edge. Dopamine, your motivation and reward chemical, can also take a hit. Chronic inflammation reduces dopamine signaling, which is why so many people with autoimmunity report fatigue. They mention that they just feel demotivated, there is loss of pleasure or feeling overwhelmed. No matter how much they want to get things done, they just can't. And it doesn't stop there. Those same immune messengers can overstimulate glutamate, which is the brain's excitatory neurotransmitter. And again, I see this raised in so many of my clients, and too much glutamate activity feels like being wired but tired. So you might not be able to sleep if your glutamate is high. Your mind is likely racing and your anxiety is high. And that's why it's so important to get ahead of this. And a lot of these markers are tested on the metabolomics panel, which again is why I love running that panel when I'm working with clients, because it just gives me a much better understanding of what is happening in their bodies. So when someone with autoimmunity says they feel anxious or depressed, it's not just a psychological response to being unwell, it's biochemical, and that's what we need to understand here. Inflammation literally changes how your brain chemistry works, and this sets the stage for the vicious cycle that we talked about earlier, because the more anxious and wired you feel, the more your nervous system stays stuck in that fight or flight response, which fuels more inflammation. Anxiety then activates your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, and your heart is likely to feel like it's racing, your cortisol can spike, and digestion can slow down. And in the short term, that is protective, but obviously in the long term, it suppresses immune regulation and worsens inflammation and switches your body into that autoimmune response. So you end up in the loop, you end up having autoimmunity, dealing with anxiety, you have nervous system stress, and then more immune dysregulation. There's even research showing that people with autoimmune thyroid disease are 3 to 5 times more likely to have an anxiety disorder, and vice versa. Chronic anxiety increases the risk of developing an autoimmune condition later in life. So what's happening biologically? Well, first let's look at the vagus nerve. This is the main highway of your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state. That is when you're in a state where your body can recover, and when you're calm, the vagus nerve keeps the heart rate steady, digestion working optimally, and inflammation under control. But chronic anxiety or stress actually dampens vagal tone, and that means the brakes aren't working anymore. Instead of a balanced nervous system, you are stuck in sympathetic overdrive, which again is that fight or flight response. We then have changes in our cortisol rhythms, and cortisol is supposed to peak in the morning. It's actually really important that it peaks. It's called the cortisol awakening response. And there has been a lot of research around this response, this peak that you get of cortisol in the morning. And research has shown that the cortisol awakening response can help your body to detect these autoantibodies that you get in autoimmune disease. So if you're not getting the spike of cortisol in the morning, it may mean that your body is not regulating the immune system as well as it can. And when I'm working with clients who are not having that spike in the morning, they're waking up feeling incredibly tired, even if they've had a long night's sleep. And cortisol gives you the energy and focus that you need in a morning. And during the daytime, what should happen is that cortisol gently declines and it helps you wind down at a night. But in a chronically stressed state, the rhythm flattens and it can become dysregulated. You don't get that strong morning rise, you feel groggy, you feel wired, and you don't get the proper evening drop. So sleep becomes light and restless, and a flat cortisol also reduces your resilience. You can't buffer stress in the way you used to. And then anxiety directly impacts the gut barrier. Stress hormones and inflammatory messengers make the gut lining more permeable, which is called leaky gut. And I've spoken about that a lot on the podcast. And when this barrier weakens, undigested food particles, toxins, and microbes can slip through into the bloodstream and trigger the immune system and create even more inflammation. And this is a major way anxiety can literally fuel autoimmunity. So when you put it all together with the underactive vagus nerve, a flattened cortisol response, leaky gut, anxiety isn't just a mental or emotional state. It's a whole body biochemical shift that feeds back into immune dysregulation. This is why I always tell clients calming your nervous system shouldn't be something of an afterthought. It is central to healing from autoimmune disease. And I've seen this over and over in clinic. For example, one of my clients with alopecia areata noticed that flare-ups always followed periods of high stress or grief. And in particular, recently, she had lost several family members over the pandemic. And that is when she noticed that her hair loss became more severe. And when we worked on her gut health, we worked on calming her nervous system, even going through the hair loss and how to let go of it and to take each day at a time, and incorporating simple practices like breathwork and vagal toning, her hair became much more stable and eventually grew back. And personally, when I was dealing with my own autoimmune symptoms years ago, I noticed flares were never just about the food I was eating or what I was doing at the time. They were about how safe my nervous system felt. And I think back to when I had chronic fatigue syndrome and was going through cycles of hair loss and having psoriasis. And one of the main symptoms I had was anxiety. I remember doing a presentation at work, and I had prepared for this presentation, but my anxiety was so bad when I got up and stood in front of people and was talking. All the thoughts in my head completely vanished, and that was just anxiety taking over. But just generally, I was living in a state of anxiety. If somebody came up behind me, I would jump. Generally felt anxious throughout my day over everything I was doing, and that just puts your body in such a vulnerable state, especially when it comes to autoimmune disease. One of the ways that I coped with it is I just pushed through and I ignored rest. Only rested when I was exhausted, which was quite often, but I wasn't getting that meaningful recovery in. And then when I created space for calm, I started prioritizing my sleep. I started walking more in nature. I got my 2 dogs. I made sure that things I was watching made me feel good rather than made me feel scared. Healing started to happen a lot more easily. And this is why I'm so passionate about teaching clients that regulating your nervous system isn't just a nice to have, it is the cornerstone of autoimmune recovery. Okay, so what can you do about this? Let's break down some of my favorite strategies for calming the nervous system and breaking that anxiety autoimmunity loop. So the first one is breathing, and we all breathe every day, but a lot of the time we are shallow breathing. And when I was doing my Pilates training, one of the first things that my instructor picked up on was that I was shallow breathing. And when your breath is shallow and fast, it tells your brain that you are under threat. But when your breath is slow, deep, and rhythmic, it signals safety. And that's because the diaphragm is connected to the vagus nerve. So even just 2 minutes of box breathing, so in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, can literally flip a switch in your nervous system. And many of my clients use this before a stressful meeting or when symptoms are flaring, and they're often surprised how quickly their heart rate settles. And you can do this throughout your day. You can do it in the morning, you could do it at a break mid-morning, you can do it at lunchtime. And really, you don't have to do as much as you think. You could just do a minute of breathing. You can do 5 minutes. There's lots of apps out there where you can do some guided breathing sessions. And it makes such a difference. It's a free resource that you have. Make the most of it. And it can make a huge difference when it comes to your nervous system. The next is to bring in some powerful daily rituals when it comes to your nervous system, because your nervous system craves predictability and chaos makes it feel unsafe. Well, routine sends a message to your nervous system that you're secure, and that's why little daily anchors are so powerful. Morning sunlight on your face or just getting outside helps reset your circadian rhythm. A consistent bedtime tells your body when to wind down, and even something as simple as drinking a herbal tea at the same time every evening creates a cue of calm. And I absolutely love my cup of chamomile tea that I have every night before going to bed. And even if I go out and socialize or I'm doing something different, I always end my day with that cup of chamomile tea. And it just makes all the difference. They really help to reprogram your body to trust that it's safe and that routine is in check. And even if you are going to find it challenging having a routine based on your lifestyle, see what you can incorporate into your day. What are the things that you can commit to? For example, the breathing is something that most of us should be able to incorporate into our day. Then we want to provide nourishment to the nervous system, because neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine aren't just made from the air, they're built from nutrients. Magnesium helps calm the nerve firing. Omega-3 fats reduce neuroinflammation. B vitamins help your body make serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, which is a way to promote calm in your body. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and it's working quite differently to glutamate, which I mentioned earlier. We want to be promoting GABA as much as we can, especially when we're in a fight or flight response. And when you're deficient, anxiety can actually be one of the first warning signs, even before physical symptoms show up. So if you've ever felt jittery, restless, or low without knowing why, it may not be in your head. It may be a signal that your brain chemistry needs more nutritional support. And then we have exercise, and exercise is a bit of a double-edged sword, because the right kind regulates stress while the wrong kind fuels it. If your adrenals are depleted and you're already inflamed, back-to-back HIIT sessions or marathon training might actually make things worse. Instead, think of movement as regulation, not a punishment, like walking in nature, restorative yoga, gentle Pilates. All of these lower cortisol and boost the parasympathetic activity. And guess what? Over time, they make your immune system more tolerant, which is exactly what you want in autoimmunity. And I found it was Reformer Pilates at exactly the right time in my life. I needed that, as well as everything I was doing with my diet and the supplements I was taking, the protocols I was following. When I started to incorporate Reformer Pilates in my daily life, I did it as much as I could, and then I was training to be a Pilates instructor. That made all the difference, because before that I had just focused on cardiovascular type exercise, which was just depleting me. And I love to exercise, but it was just way too much for me when I had chronic fatigue syndrome. But I found that I was able to commit to Pilates Reformer and it wouldn't burn me out in the same way as the cardiovascular exercise. And then lastly, vagal toning tools can be extremely helpful. The vagus nerve loves stimulation, and I've talked about it a lot. I've done a separate podcast episode on this if you want to go back and listen to that. And you can do this with really simple tools like cold water face dips can help with your vagal tone, humming, singing, just put on your favorite song and sing along to it. Chanting and even gargling with water can help to build that vagal tone. And these send direct signals to the brainstem saying we're safe, we're relaxed. And my clients are often shocked at how effective these simple practices are. I even had a client who was having lots of heart palpitations, lots of racing thoughts, and started a humming practice. And she started feeling so much better just as a result of doing that. I speak a lot on the podcast about a device that I use, which is the NeuroSim, and I am an affiliate for NeuroSim. And that helps me to get into that parasympathetic state and helps me to focus and feel more at ease. But you don't need one of those. You can find other practices that can help with that as well. If you would like to find out more about that, I will put that in the show notes. Another client found that just putting her shower to cold for 20 seconds at the end of a warm shower really helped her to feel more at ease, and she just felt really exhilarated from it as well. And we all need to find something that's going to work for us, because these tiny inputs can actually make huge shifts. And then lastly, one of the most overlooked ways that you can support your nervous system are boundaries. So many of us push through the day without pausing, saying yes to everything, and our nervous system never gets a chance to reset. This chronic drip feed of stress is what turns anxiety into inflammation. And boundaries can look like leaving 10 minutes between meetings, saying no to a commitment that drains you, or simply taking 5 minutes of a reset break to step outside, breathe, and stress. And these micro recoveries prevent stress from percolating into chronic anxiety, which in turn helps your immune system stay regulated. It's not always about a week-long holiday. It's the little safety signals you build into every day. I want to leave you with a reframe. Anxiety isn't your enemy. It's your body's way of saying, I don't feel safe. And when you start listening and responding with nervous system care, you not only reduce anxiety, you create the conditions for your immune system to recover. And this is the piece so often missed in autoimmune protocols. It's not just diet, it's not just about supplements. Recovery happens when the body and mind feel safe again. So that's the anxiety autoimmunity loop. If this has resonated with you, I'd love you to share the episode with a friend who's managing their own autoimmune challenges at the moment. And if you'd like more tools, I will link my free guide, the Autoimmunity Recovery Plan, so that you can start making changes today to get you on that path of recovery. You can easily incorporate some of the recommendations in that plan, even today, once you download it. So thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, remember, your body is not broken. It just needs the right conditions for proper recovery. I'll see you in the next episode. Have a fantastic rest of your week and take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time, and remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.